Hey guys, it's Preston bringing another painting tutorial today. Today we're showing you how to paint the fallen ruins that are available on our web store. These are great terrain pieces that can be used for scatter terrain in your war games, for D&D, or for any kind of other diorama miniature painting needs. So today we're going to be showing you how to paint this up in a variety of different styles using the airbrush. It's focused on speed. It's going to show you how to get these on the table quickly, and you can apply these techniques to all of your terrain. So let's get started. Here we have our primed black fallen ruin ready to take some paint. So we've got our airbrush ready to go here. And the first color scheme we're going to show you guys is just a standard gray stone color scheme. So this is pretty simple and standard. Goes well with most things. Alright guys, so first thing we're going to start with is our titanium white golden high flow acrylic. We're going to be using this as a lethal highlight technique through the airbrush. Let's see. So we're using our airbrush today to do most of this work here. We're going to do a little bit of dry brushing here, but this stuff is focused on speed, trying to get all of your terrain out on the board so you can get your games going. I'm going to load up a little bit of my titanium white into the airbrush here. Alright guys, so we got the titanium white loaded up in our airbrush. We're just going to add a bit of thinner to that. I like doing 3-to-1 ratio of paint and thinner when I'm using this high flow acrylic. Because it's already really thin, it's going to work nicely through the airbrush for us. Just test out my spray on here. And then we'll go ahead and get started just real quickly in a downwards angle, spraying from above. We kind of mist on this white paint. Create a little bit of a haze for us here. So I'm focusing on the higher areas of the stone here. Create contrast. Let this white paint naturally collect in those raised areas. And you can do this as much as you want to, but the main idea is we want to have areas that are completely black and areas that are completely white, so we have a nice variety of contrast on our ruins here. So that's step one. Fallen ruins come in two variants. Here's another one with a slightly taller broken column there. So you can mix and match these. Go. Alright guys, so with these gray ruins, we're going to start with a nice deep blue color. This is going to help give us some nice rich cold shadows to build up from. I'm going to be using Signal Blue from Vallejo Model Air, but you can use any kind of dark blue you want to use. The main thing that we want to do here is make sure that we thin our paint down to a nice glaze. Usually that means about 2-to-1 consistency of paint to thinner in our airbrush. Even with this airbrush ready paint, like the Vallejo Model Air, I'm still going to add some thinner to it. Just a little bit of thinner there. Alright, so with this color, I'm going to come in from the reverse angle that we did before with our whites. Now that we've already established all of our areas that are going to be brighter and darker, we're going to be aiming this blue color into the shadow areas, so all of those black and dark gray areas. To accomplish this quickly and easily, we can just make sure that the angle that we spray at is always in kind of an upwards angle from underneath. Like I said, just like the opposite of what we were doing in that previous step, the opposite angle. We're coming in. Just laying down this nice dark blue color here. The shadows. There we go. That's step 2. So adding in those blue shadows is a step you can skip if you really want to. But I like doing it just because it makes it a little bit more interesting. You don't just have a black and white stones. You get a little bit of an extra tone in there. Our next color we're going to be using is Anthracite Gray from Vallejo Model Air. This is a nice kind of darker mid-tone green, or gray rather. It's a kind of a nice darker mid-tone gray. And we're going to be applying this from above this time with our airbrush in the same kind of angle that we did with our zenithal highlights. So we're aiming into all of those areas that are white and lighter gray, the areas that were left behind when we applied our blue glaze in the previous step. Same thing, I'm going to add a little bit of thinner to my airbrush, mix it up. Glazing this color on to the highlight areas. It's really going to tone down the brighter white, and we're going to let it kind of blend together with that blue color in the shadows here as we glaze it on. But don't need a whole lot of that. We don't want to completely bring down all of our highlights. But in the next step, we're going to be coming in with a lighter gray to highlight it a little bit more. So that's it for step 3. So now it's time for step 4, and we're going to be using a lighter gray color now to reestablish our highlights on all of these ruins here. The color I'm using today is Rainy Gray from Reaper Paints, but just like I was saying in those previous steps, you can really use any colors you want to. These are just the colors we're using today. You can use any similar colors to these. We just need a light, cold gray here. And our Rainy Gray is going to do a good job. The Reaper paint's a little bit thicker than the Vallejo paint was, so I'm just going to add a little bit more thinner to it, just a touch more. But I'm also going to use a kind of beat up brush here, my mixing brush, to mix it up in the pot. Just to make sure that it's really nicely mixed up for me. Won't give me any problems going through the airbrush. So now we're coming in from the same angle as step 3, but this time we're going to be more targeted. We're going to be focusing directly onto the raised areas of these stones with the airbrush. See, I'm hitting the top edges of the rocks. I'm kind of choosing which edges to hit. Even these small stones that are kind of laying around the base, I'm picking those out a bit with this color. Just kind of bring those out. can see in this step I'm coming in a lot more close to the model here. All right. And that's it for step 4. Alright, so that does it for the airbrush with this color scheme. Now we're going to switch to a dry brush to finish this thing up. And the last step after that, we'll just add a little bit of weathering pigment to it as well, just to kind of add a little bit more depth into it too. So I'm going to take my rainy gray again. This is the color we used in the previous step for our highlights with the airbrush. Now we're going to just put it on our palette. Got my dry brush here. And so in our previous step, running this through the airbrush is definitely going to tone down the brightness of this color as we're applying it as a pretty thin glaze over everything. But now with the dry brush, we're just going to come in and hit the edges of everything with this dry brush, kind of bring out the texture a bit more on the stones. So with the dry brushing, I'm just putting some of the paints on my stiff bristled brush here and removing most of that paint with a paper towel here. Just leaving a little bit left over that I can then just drag across the model. It's going to just kind of naturally hit all of those edges on everything. Just kind of quickly highlight them for us. Can even do the rubble, like the gravel and stuff around the base here. So yeah, now I'm just gonna add a little bit, a touch of white to the rainy gray here on my palette, and just mix it together. There's some brighter gray. Take off most of the excess on my paper towel there, and then do the same thing, but just focusing higher up on the model now. Being a bit more careful with it, a bit more targeted, just aiming for the very highest points on these rocks. Just do our final highlight. Yeah, now I have some nice gray stones with a little bit of blue in the shadows. Makes it a little bit more interesting. Alright, so right now, guys, it's at a pretty good stage. We could put this on a tabletop and be pretty satisfied with it. Final step, though, I'm just going to add a little bit of this weathering pigment to it, just to add a little bit extra touch. We also offer this in our web store. If you want to check it out, we have it in all kinds of different colors. Today on the gray ruins, I'm going to be using black weathering pigment. So when using the weathering pigment, I'm going to use my beat up brush here. This is the same brush I use to mix my paints. This brush has seen better days, but it's never really, it's not a good idea to throw your brushes away immediately. You can always find a use for your older brushes, doing these things that you don't want to mess up your nice brushes with. So I'm using the cap of the weathering pigment jar here as a little palette, because a little bit of this stuff goes a long way, guys. So I'm getting most of it off of the brush onto the palette there, and then I'm just going to kind of dap it on to the ruins here into parts where I want to make the contrast a little bit deeper. I want to darken up those shadows. This black weathering pigment is really great for that. So yeah, we're just gonna apply this into those areas. You can use other colors of weathering pigment too. I just chose to use black because I want to make these nice and cold gray ruins here. Black is going to help me with that. Alright guys, so here is our gray ruins ready to go, put on the tabletop, looking pretty cool.